Hi, I'm Zach Singerman, and welcome to the Learning from Leaders series. Today, our guest is Paula Shoyer, who is the Kosher baker. She is a TV celebrity, a trained French pastry chef, and the author of 5 cookbooks. Ms. Shoyer, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Zach. Nice to be here with you today.
So, although you are a chef who's been on Food Network for baking competition shows a bunch of times, a lot of people don't really know that you were actually a lawyer. So can you tell our audience how you decided to not be a lawyer anymore and how you became a trained French pastry chef and then really took on the kosher baking world?
Sure. And like most things in life, it's not always planned out exactly like how you thought it was going to be. So I went to college at Brandeis to be a doctor and ended up in law school after a really bad day in the chemistry lab when everything went wrong. And I decided that that was a sign from God that I had another destiny. So I pursued law, went to law school in Washington, D.C. I was practicing law in Washington, and I met my husband here. And after working for 4 years, his work with the U.S. government sent us to live in Geneva, Switzerland as diplomats. While I was there, I had a job with a Jewish organization advocating for Israel at the United Nations, working as a speechwriter. And after my daughter Emily was born, I just decided to leave the job. It became really difficult to balance and decided to go to cooking school in Paris just for fun, not planning a new career, just thought I would learn how to bake better because I was living in Europe and why not? So I took this course in Paris and I stayed with friends there, and I would come back to Geneva and people in my community would ask me to bake for them and insist on paying me. So I ended up with a catering business out of an extremely tiny kitchen. And at some point, a woman I knew from synagogue asked if I would teach a cooking class for the women in a Jewish women's group. And I did that in my apartment in French, which was probably more comedy than instruction, but somehow I got through it. And that started my love of teaching. I came back to Washington, D.C. with 2 kids in tow and started teaching cooking classes in my home kitchen, just word of mouth in the community. And then I was asked by another cookbook author to edit 2 of her cookbooks. And I realized I had taken all the recipes from my classes in Paris, converted them into par dairy-free recipes. So I had all these recipes and I thought, well, I could write my own book. So I started pursuing that. It took 5 years to get that cookbook, The Kosher Baker, out into the world. And every publisher said no. And I finally got a press to publish it, and then everything kind of went from there. So it wasn't kind of a decision. It was one of those kind of life situations where here's an opportunity, and let's just go down this path and kind of see where it leads.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think traditional Jewish foods really bring the Jewish community together? And what do you think are the merits of traditional Jewish recipes?
So one of the things I talk about a lot when I teach my classes is this idea of a food story. So every single person, Jewish or not, has a food story, which is kind of a collection of their food memories. So it could be food you ate in your mother's home or your grandmother's home, or something you tasted on vacation, or the first thing you made living off campus in college, or something you may have cooked in high school with a bunch of your friends together in someone's kitchen. So all of those memories become part of your story, and you could bring that to the table by bringing recipes that tell that story when you eat. And I always tell people you should bring, just like we have old and young people at the table, you used to have old recipes and new recipes. And old recipes are these traditional Jewish foods that we've eaten from generations so that the next generation kind of sees how wonderful they are and will pass them on further. But then you could also add something new and create new traditions, new Jewish traditions. So I've tried to take a lot of traditional Jewish recipes and make them healthier, which I did in my Healthy Jewish Kitchen cookbook, as a way to kind of make traditional Jewish food more appealing to a younger generation of cooks who really are, in some, not all, but many are concerned about health. So, our Jewish food tradition is so rich with both Ashkenazi and Sephardi recipes, but really influences from everywhere. There are Jews who have lived in China, and there are Jews who have lived in, different parts of the Arab world all over Europe, and we all kind of infuse our tables with all these different influences, which is something really wonderful because it's a way to connect people and connect you with people around the world. And one of the things I always say about including Jewish, like traditional Jewish food at your table, because like you know this, Zach, most Jewish and kosher people from Sunday to Friday, they're eating what everybody else in America is eating. Mm-hmm. And it's on Shabbat and holidays that we think, oh, we want to kind of bring our relatives to the table. We want to remember those recipes, and we make traditional Jewish foods. Mm-hmm. For years, I used to come up with like great themed recipe menus for Shabbat dinners. And then I realized if I don't serve my children the traditional recipes, they won't associate them with our various holiday celebrations. So I'm pretty traditional on the holidays. Although I will say that this year, since Christmas Eve is Friday night, I'm doing an all Chinese dinner for Shabbat dinner. So that's kind of a way to create a new tradition.
Mm-hmm. So for some of us in Gen Z, we're more removed from traditional Jewish cooking than previous generations have been. Where would you tell them to start exploring Jewish foods?
Well, it's very interesting that you say that because honestly, like Jewish food is having kind of a real renaissance right now, and it's becoming a lot more mainstream than it used to be. Most people in America couldn't even tell you that a bagel has Jewish origins. They don't even know. Bagels are everywhere. You could go to Kentucky, you could be in, Boise, Idaho, and you're going to find a bagel. It may not be as good a bagel as you'd find like on the East Coast, particularly New York, but it's still a bagel. So Jewish food is so much of it is everywhere. And what's been, I think, really good for Jewish food is the Israeli food trend, which started years ago. I mean, we're talking like 7 years now of Israeli food, not just influencing, cookbook writing, but also restaurants, kind of all over the United States.
So many falafels.
It's really popular, right? So it really, and it also, I think it also helps people see that, like, Israeli food / Jewish food is something that they want to have. So I feel like it's there. For your generation, you can find it more easily than people could years ago, where you had to go to specifically Jewish neighborhoods to get a bagel, to get box, to get, rugelach, black and white cookies, whatever it is. And now it's all kind of spread out. But if you're, for somebody who's like new to Jewish food, especially Ashkenazi, well, I would say this about all kinds of traditional Jewish, Ashkenazi, and Sephardi food. Think about people who were forced to move to a lot of different places, right? They couldn't always take all their pots and pans with them. They couldn't take all their recipe books. They just had to pick up and go, whether it was a pogrom in Russia or Jews in North Africa or the Holocaust, right? People just had to pick up and go. So they had their recipes in their heads, and wherever they went, they had to find kind of a new way to make those recipes, right? New ingredients, new tools, different kinds of ovens. So we're always trying to kind of adapt that. So because of that, kind of the wandering Jew history, a lot of the Jewish recipes aren't that fussy. There are definitely a lot of recipes where there's a dough and a filling, because every culture has those, where you would, women used to sit around at a big kitchen table, like 3 generations of women would be filling those barekas and filling those Moroccan cigars. We don't have that anymore. But the basic food is not that complicated. So I feel like it's a really good way for any young person to learn how to cook, not just Jewish food, but all food. Chicken soup is really basic. All you need to know how to do is cut up some vegetables, and not even that much. How to clean vegetables and throw them in a pot with water and some chicken. Pretty basic stuff. So I think that there are so many great cookbooks out there, mine, but many others, but just really start simple and not be afraid, because once again, because of our history, our recipes, our kind of basic recipes are not always it's not all stuffed cabbage, it's some, which, my grandmother's stuffed cabbage took like every burner on my stovetop and every surface of my kitchen to put those together. But I streamlined that recipe. So not all the recipes are like that. Israeli salads are so easy. It's a great way to start. There's so many one bowl cakes. I love, kind of traditional Jewish baking, which is probably like German and Austrian in origin. But so many of it is just throwing a bunch of ingredients and apples and just baking it in a pan. So there's a lot of recipes that, like, if you were going to say to me, okay, how would somebody get started a French pastry? That's a whole different ballgame. But like Jewish baking is really not that complicated. Challah is something you can easily master with And
Mm-hmm.
like everything else, once you've made it once, like you know what you're doing, and then you can keep improving on it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's Instagram and TikTok. But really, today, and to me, Instagram is like kind of a new kind of a cookbook. It's a new kind of like
Mm-hmm.
community of people where you can just learn from others and be. I'm always inspired by challah braiding online and different flavors of babka. Even though I'm always coming up with new flavors of babka, but you know, it's really fun to see what everybody else is doing and have a conversation about it.
So, what do you think is your, just like as a fun question, what do you think is your favorite dessert to bake?
You know, it's so interesting. I love to make very complicated kind of French recipes, but in terms of what I like to eat, I like simpler things. I would say like probably babka is probably the most satisfying thing. I
Definitely.
love working with yeast doughs. I love challah. I love babka. I like playing around with the different fillings and shapes of it. So it's just, I mean, babka is basically like bread and chocolate. I mean, and then of course a myriad of fillings, but there's something, it's, you know, kind of your classic comfort food. It's a thing that we
Mm-hmm.
all crave in my home and we always hope to have in the freezer.
So, what advice do you have for Gen Z to follow their passions into a career?
Well, I think that first you have to be flexible, right? And I think that if you with all the uncertainty you have already seen in your own generation, like it's hard always to plan everything. But figure out what you're good at, but also what you really like to do. Sometimes those things match up perfectly and sometimes they don't. So, you know, my advice would be, you know, if you're going to college, like go and study as many different things as possible and figure out what you like to do. And know that there are just so many paths. And and obviously just work hard at everything you do. But you know, you live in a generation which is different. When I was growing up, finding an internship wasn't so easy. You know, I might say I want to learn about something, but it wasn't as formal as it is today. Like
Mm-hmm.
whatever field you're interested in and you're willing to work for free or for very little money, you can find somebody who will take you on and teach you. So it's such a great way to figure out what you want to do. So you have summers and you have, you know, maybe a gap year. And then even once you start college, like part-time in school, like every opportunity you have to try something different. And if 5 things in a row are what you don't want to do, that's extremely valuable information. So just be flexible, be open to just try to learn, but really getting job experience is really, because it's very different to sit in a classroom and say, oh, I love studying this, but then what are you going to do with that? Well, see what's out there. If you live in a major city, if you're in Washington, there's so many opportunities in high school to kind of learn about different careers and try out different kinds of internships and see like what fits. And you just keep doing that. And just know that, you know, for me, it wasn't a decision. I'm going to stop being a lawyer. I'm going to become a chef. I had an opportunity. I pursued it. But in between practicing law and being a chef, I was a speech writer. So I just kind of went with opportunities. But I really became a chef when I was like 30 years old. So, you know, and I feel like even at my age now, like I still have other things I might want to do. And you just have to be open to different opportunities. Trust your gut. Listen to other people who've been there before you. Okay. Parents and parents' friends. Like people aren't necessarily have an agenda. Like, you know, people have had so many different experiences and just listen to
Mm-hmm.
what people have learned in their longer lives than yours and just see what you can take from those, but just try. And whatever you do, just really give it 100% because people are going to say no. People are going to close doors in your face. People are going to tell you that, oh, that doesn't make sense, or that's a crazy idea for a startup, or like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you have to stay true to your own core as well and find something that is meaningful. But at the same time, I also think your generation and also the one before it put so much pressure on yourselves that your work has to define every like your whole life. Okay, that's a very American notion that we are what we do professionally, and if you can see your work, yes, there are some people who are, you know, very certain kind of a personality. They go into certain healthcare jobs and they can combine that. My daughter works in an area of art which is very much tied to her Holocaust education at JDS in some ways, but for most people, like your job doesn't have to be everything. Like who you are is not necessarily what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't feel like you have to find, there's no perfect job. There's no, it has to be everything, because honestly, like, there's honor in all work, and what you do to make a living can sometimes fund the hobbies and other interests you have, right? So it doesn't have to be all. Don't put so much pressure to find the job that satisfied every part of you, who you are as a person. Like, find the job as something that you'd be really happy doing, and that it can be meaningful and contribute to the world in some way. But even if it doesn't, know that you can also kind of use what you make to kind of fund other hobbies, whether it's hiking or traveling or other kinds of chesed you want to do. So that's kind of a way to take some of the pressure off.
And is there anything else you'd like to say to Gen Z?
What else would I like to say? All I hope for your generation and for many is that I just hope that soon your life will get back to a normal where you get to kind of make decisions, travel, go abroad, have as many different experiences in your life that will really help you make those decisions about what jobs to pursue and where to study and the things you want to learn on your own. But always see learning as something that's lifelong, that it isn't just like school and work, that you can always keep learning and find ways to kind of help you make those decisions along the way, but also know that, and I know that your generation just cares so much about the environment and is so in tune to all the various problems of the world. And if, like I said before, like, if your job doesn't do that, then in your free time, find a way to do that and I know that your JDS education has instilled in you this, like, the importance of contributing to the world, but just always make sure that you can find a way to do that, even in small ways, is meaningful. And, don't be afraid to try any recipe, challenge yourselves in the kitchen. The one thing I always say is, like, we cook to survive, but we bake to share. So the reason I really see myself as a baker is that we bake to comfort and uplift and celebrate. So become a decent baker, because then, like, you'll be everybody's best friend. Oh. And it's a way to help other people through difficult times. So cooking is something that you can really use to share and celebrate, comfort in so many different ways.
Well, Ms. Shoyer, thank you so much for coming on today. It was great having you.
Well, thank you so much. This was fun, and your questions were great, and, continued success with this project.
Thank you so much. Bye.